Paul Brodie and I are collaborating on making a trophy. In my last video, I made the bottom layer of the trophy, and Paul has made the second layer already, so this time I'll make layer number 3. It's basically going to be a cylinder of aluminum, and I'll put a wave pattern in it with a bead roller. So I've calculated the length of the blank of metal I need to make the cylinder, which is 6 5/8 inches in diameter. I'm going to lay out the wave pattern before I roll this into a cylinder. So this is the template I'll use for the wave. And the way this works is there's going to be one continuous line making 3 rings of waves that go all the way around this piece of metal. And the beginning and end points will match up precisely. I'm going to do the layout while it's flat since it's so much easier. So I'll line up the left end of my template with the left end of my blank. I'll get this clamped into place. Then I'll use a felt tip marker to make a line on the panel. Then I'm going to mark where the end of my blank meets the pattern. I'll shift the pattern down, line up this mark with the left end of my blank, clamp this into place, and now I can lay out the second line. I'll mark my blank exactly where that line ends, shift my pattern down, get this clamped into place, and continue the pattern. I'll mark my template where the end of the blank is. Slide this down one more time, align my new mark, clamp it in place, and this will be my third line. So the 3 lines make a repeating pattern. I think this will be perfect for the trophy. So now I'll get set up to roll this into a cylinder. The cylinder I'm making will be 6 5/8 inches in diameter, and I'm bending it over a 4-inch tube. With the spring back I get, this should be just about the right size. So I'm going to do this in 3 steps. I'm going to form the center of the bend first, just by pressing my part down around this tube. And then to bend the ends, I put a little clamp on this tube. So I'll just slide the metal down so it's held by the clamp and tighten the screws. And then I can roll this around, and we've got about half the bend done. Now I'll loosen these screws, flip this around, retighten the screws, and now I can bend the rest of it. So that's a real easy way to bend a cylinder. And I'll pull this apart and see how close the ends are to fitting together. Very, very close. So bending in this way, you don't get much of a flat spot on the end of the panel, whereas if you use a slip roll, there's always a flat spot of some sort. And looking on the inside, you can see how nicely those lines match up. So now I can weld this together. So I have the ends of the ring clamped tightly together, and I'm ready to tack weld the joint. I'll clean the metal with the wire brush. And now I can tack weld it. Now I'll pull one of these clamps off, and I'll clean that joint again and weld the right side of the joint. Now I'll put the first clamp back into place. Remove the second clamp, clean the joint again, and finish the weld. I also want to fusion weld the inside of this together. So I'll get this clamped up to support it, and I'll run a bead on the inside. When this weld cools, I'll smooth it both inside and out. I'll sand the outside of this weld down flat now. To smooth the inside, I'm going to hammer the weld. That will compress the weld down and put some strength back into it. When you weld aluminum, it anneals it. So let's take a look at the inside of that now. That's much smoother. I think that'll be fine. So I'll put the final finish on the outside now. So that was 120 grit. Now I'll go to 180 grit. Now I'll go to 240 grit on an orbital sander. So that's cleaned up the weld very nicely. I'll go over this whole ring with a Scotch-Brite pad to give it a uniform sheen, and then I'll connect these lines on the inside to make them continuous through the weld. I'll work this with Scotch-Brite to give it a bright finish. The Scotch-Brite finish is very bright, and it's impossible to tell where the weld is from the outside. So I'll connect these lines now, and we'll run this through the bead roller. I have a urethane skateboard wheel on the bottom and a pointed die on the top. I'll start at one point on this line, and this line makes 3 loops around the part, and the way I've done the layout, the beginning should meet the end perfectly. So let's get started. I'm going to bring the pressure down on this slowly. I'm going down 1.5 turns. And I'm going really slowly with the machine. Okay, we're at our full pressure setting now. I'm following that line as best I can. And the beauty of working over a urethane wheel is that these lines can cross over each other without mashing them flat. If you do this with steel wheels, you will have a problem with that. Okay, we're coming around to the starting point, so I'll lighten the pressure, pull this out, and I think that's created a lovely pattern. So the last step is to form the caps that will finish this off. I've cut 2 discs from aluminum sheet to make the top and bottom cap. I'm going to form a flange on the edge of each disc. The form I'm using is made from MDF, and I'll put this in the lathe to do the forming. If you'd like to see how I made these forms, take a look at my previous video. So I have the MDF form put in a lathe, and there's a clamping block on top of it. And the business end of this is a ball bearing that I've attached to a shaft, and then I've just clamped this shaft onto the compound feed. So let's start forming this flange over with the ball bearing. So I've gone over about 15 degrees on the first pass. I'm going to angle the compound a little bit more. I'll make another pass on this. I'll angle the compound a little more. Now we'll set the compound for 90 degrees. And there's our flange. Now I'll pull this apart. And I'll pop this disc off. To finish this off, I want to round over this edge. So I have some beading dies put on the bead roller, and I'm going to put a plywood disc on here, and the function of this is just to hold this part vertical as I'm doing the forming. So I'll roll this through a little at a time. I'll crank this down one turn. Now we'll go to 1.5 turns. And 2 turns will be full depth on this. Alright, the forming's done. So I'll pull this apart. And we'll try the fit against the center part. So let's see how these parts fit together. I actually got a very, very nice snug fit. The fit is so good, in fact, that I don't think I need any mechanical fasteners to hold this together. It's really quite stable. So I put a spacer in the first layer I made, but I don't think this needs it. So the last step will be to put a grained finish on these surfaces. And that's all it takes. So I love that grained finish. I'm going to assemble this now so we can see how it looks. And I have a spacer under layer number 3 to represent the thickness of layer number 2, which Paul has already completed. So remember, at the end of this project we'll have a raffle, and the winner of the raffle will get the trophy. The way it works is, to enter the raffle, make a comment saying "Trophy, Trophy." You can enter once for each of my videos and once for each of Paul's videos. At the end of the project, we'll draw one name from all the entries and we'll ship the trophy to the winner. So both Paul and I have one more layer to go, and we'll probably surprise you.